Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the John Carter Brown Library. My name is Neil Safir. I'm the director of the library. I think I know many of you, if not all of you, in this special session. But it's our thrill tonight to have a special event for you, our associates, and to be able to celebrate this exhibition that has been many, many months and even years in the making with you tonight from the reading room. In this moment of pandemic, when there is so much that is unusual and abnormal about our lives, and when there's so many people who are suffering and have challenges, we must remember that institutions like this one are designed and have made it through very challenging moments. They're designed and they're meant to keep us focused on the things that we really value. In this particular case, around books, around knowledge, and around the sky. It's a special privilege for me to be broadcasting this from the reading room of the library. As many of you know, we recently reopened the reading room to select researchers after many months of being closed, and according to very rigid and rigorous safety protocols. But now we are providing people with materials in the reading room, safely distanced with appropriate protocols, and we're excited to be able to do this. So as I said, this is really an evening to celebrate our research at the library, our fellowship program, as well as undergraduate instruction at the John Carter Brown Library. We'll be hearing a little bit more of that in just a moment. And I'm thrilled to present this exhibition, which is really the fifth and final chapter of a four-part program that we began in 2014 around the four elements, beginning with earth, then air, then fire, then water. All of this was an exploration of early environmental history through the collection of the John Carter Brown Library. But as we went through this and we're thinking about Aristotle and the elements, we said to ourselves, something is missing. And what was missing really was the celestial sphere. And as if on cue, as if it was heavenly ordained, it was right around that time that I met a researcher by the name of Nidia Pineda, who was a specialist in astronomical images, and in particular, lunar cartographies. And I met her at a History of Cartography conference in Brazil. Later, she made her way to the John Carter Brown Library as a research fellow to work on the history of astronomical images. Coincidentally, at the same time, there was another research fellow in residence by the name of Tomás Haddad, a Brazilian scholar and specialist in early astronomy. And it didn't take very long for the two of them to get together and think about the ways that their research intersected. And they essentially around that time, and I should mention that this is precisely the kind of serendipitous encounters that we're having a difficult time doing right now. This is the whole reason, the raison d'etre of our residential fellowship program, so that scholars like Nidia and Tomás can meet one another, can have drinks and food together, and can commune together around books and hatch these new research projects. Nothing will ever take the place of in-person engagement with our collection. So during that time, Tomás and Nidia hatched this project that has really come to fruition over the course of the past few years. First at a meeting in Mexico City in February of 2018, when Nidia organized with her colleagues at UNAM in Mexico City a workshop around celestial images that the JCB was privileged to participate in, and that was supported by a unfortunately recently departed dear friend of the library, Robert Gordon, whom some of you I know will know. Last spring, fast forwarding a bit, before the lockdown, Nidia, Tomas, and I taught an undergraduate course on the history of scientific books in the Americas. This was sponsored by the Watts program in the history and culture of the book that the JCB has as an endowed fund. And it was during this time that the plans were really elaborated. Nidia, I should just mention, arrived in early March, 1 week before the library had to close down. We'll get back to that in just a moment. I personally take a particular pride that Nidia and Tomas are from countries whose cultural patrimony takes particular pride of place here at the JCB. That is Mexico and Brazil. But let me emphasize and make no doubt about it, Nidia and Tomas are internationally recognized scholars. They are the leading scholars in their fields, and their reputation extends far beyond their home countries. Indeed, Nidia, during the period that she was here in Providence, was hired at the University of California at San Diego as an assistant professor in history and the history of science, which is a wonderful thing for us to celebrate and to see as a collaborative partner in the future. Tomas, an internationally recognized leader in astronomy who is fluent in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. I was just participating in an event earlier today where his brilliant Spanish was remarked upon by a Spaniard, no less. These are the people who will take us through a guided tour of this extraordinary exhibition that they have put together over the last several months, ranging wide in our collection on constellations, reimagining celestial histories in the early Americas. So with that, I pass things over to Tomas and Nidia, who will guide us through the first part of this presentation.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm speaking to you from Mexico City. I'm really happy to be talking about this exhibition tonight. It's been a long process. It's been a very happy, exciting. It's been a great period working with Tomas and with the JCB collections. Right, so as Neil was saying, the idea of making this exhibition digital really came up when we were teaching with JCB materials at the start of the pandemic. And we had to work with digital materials in creative ways. We saw how effective that could be in teaching. And then we thought this was actually the best way of presenting our curatorial ideas. Paradoxically, the epidemic and the confinement suddenly meant an opportunity of breaking physical barriers. Since we were no longer able to show books in cases, we imagined the possibility of organizing and reorganizing all the books in different ways in a digital space, in an interactive environment. So we wanted to construct a changing sky where the books are stars, we as readers are stargazers, and our different ways of reading create different constellations.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Neil, for your generous introduction. Neil is broadcasting from the reading room, and I'm broadcasting from Firing House, the fellows house of the JCB. So in a way, I'm inside a part of the JCB as well. But like Nidia was telling you, this started the idea of going digital started when the pandemic struck. But even before that, when the exhibition was intended to be a regular physical exhibition, we already knew we didn't want to give another version of the traditional history of astronomy, a history of discovery, progress. What we wanted was to give viewers a collection of histories, histories about the people across the Americas who looked at the sky, the books they used, the books they wrote. We, for the exhibition, as it ended up becoming a digital exhibition, we worked since late April until late September with a lot of previously digitized material from the JCB, but also we had around 30% of our almost 90 books digitized specially for this occasion. And quite a few of those objects were also cataloged for this exhibition, and they can be reached by people all over the world. And I think this is one of the most important things about this exhibition. It can create new audiences. It can reach out to people who are unable to come to the JCB because of the pandemic or for other reasons. And this can foster research in many places. And also, I think one thing that this exhibition project may create are new ways of using digital material.
So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the exhibition narrative and the platforms that express that narrative. So coming back to the metaphor behind the exhibition, we wanted to build a sky, a star chart. But unlike classical star charts, in our map of the sky, the same books can be part of different constellations. So our constellations aren't really fixed categories. They're more like expansive metaphors, like webs that expand and interconnect. And so with the resources we had and with the time, we found two ways of representing this sky. One is making threads of stars, so to say. So this would be more like a linear narrative, using the structure that is built into the JCB website, using the carousel structure. You can read down and read every constellation, and then you can read across and see what is contained in each one. And we were able to create this way of exhibiting the objects with the help of Tara Kingsley, who is Assistant Director of Academic Programming. And the second way we found of representing our sky was through a collaboration with computer scientists in the National Autonomous University of Mexico. These computer scientists are specialized in visualization analysis, and with them, we are creating a digital space in which viewers can navigate through the constellations in a free way. And they can go from one star to another and decide the trajectories that their reading can take. And we hope that this platform will be launched in a couple of weeks. We're giving a preview to the exhibition with the JCB website tomorrow, but this is just building suspense for the other platform. And now we're going to give a little tour of highlights.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about our constellations. There are 10 of them. We are just gonna show you highlights from 3 or 4 constellations tonight. The first one, we want to show is called Learning to Navigate the Skies. And this constellation, this group of JCB objects, it brings several books that were used by navigators, by missionaries, by civil servants, by adventurers, people who crossed the Atlantic back and forth since the late 15th century, and they had to know, they had to learn ways of orienting themselves, of knowing where they were. But also in this constellations, there are books that were used in learning settings in universities, schools. Well, just to give you an idea of one of the books that's part of this constellation, let me click here and we are gonna see what this shows us. So this is a very important book. This is a 16th century book called The Art of Navigation by someone named Martín Cortés. Well, this is a Spanish author. In fact, this book was possibly the main book for learning navigational astronomy in the 16th century by English sailors. But the book was originally written and published in Spain. And just a couple of years after its first printing, the British thought it was a very important book. They wanted to have it translated. And it's a very practical book. It has even a lot of paper instruments inside it, the so-called volvels. And this is something beautiful, and perhaps we can have a chance to have a look at one of those.
Sure. Here is actually the art of navigation that Tomás was just showing. As you can see, it's a fairly small book published in 1589. Englished out of Spanish by Richard Eden, who was a very important figure in the Renaissance. And as you look through, in addition to some of the more important kind of schematic diagrams and some images of different, the zodiac and such, we get back to the end here where you can actually see some of the original volvels in perfect condition right here. I hope you can see that. I'm not going to move that one because it's a little bit complicated, but I will, as we get back, move this one.
It's Felipe here. I can't see, I can see Tomás's screen, but not yours. I don't know whether that's a failure of my system or whether other people are in the same situation.
Do you want to maybe take off the PowerPoint, or can everybody else see this?
Can't see it.
It's
Can't
not,
see it.
it's
Cannot
not
see
in the share
finger.
screen window. It's in a window like one of your faces.
It's in a little window.
Another window called needs to appear, but it's not.
Maddie, can you just pin that? Just pin the video screen for me, and
Yeah, if everyone wants to, there's a view that says view side by side speaker. We have a couple of the views spotlighted, so that will be able to allow you to see Tomás, Nidia, the PowerPoint, and the book itself.
How do we do that?
If you go to your screen, there's a view button on like the top right corner. If you click on it, there's a side by side speaker option that should show you everything.
Well, I'm all right now. I can see it now. Thank you.
Great.
great. So just to return, I just briefly showed the cover page right here, and you can actually see some manuscript markings here. And when we go down to the back, here's a wonderful Volvel as well, right here. You can see with the image still on here. And here is another one here. And I was joking earlier with our speakers that if I knew how to use this thing, I'm confident that I could predict the election results for next Tuesday's election. But unfortunately, I didn't take the instructions clearly enough. In any case, this is one of the wonders of maintaining the material. You can actually see with this little annotation that this is one of the earliest books to come into the JCB's collection, very likely in the 19th century. So I hope that gives you a good sense of that object. We can return now to the constellations.
Okay, fantastic, Neil. Thank you. So let's go back to our constellation. This is the book that we've just seen. But now there is another book blinking here. And what's this? This is José de Acosta's Natural and Moral History of the Indies, one of the most influential books ever written about the Americas. Well, everybody knows it as a religious book. This is the blueprint for the evangelization of indigenous peoples in the Americas, but it's also got a quite long chapter on astronomy. So this is why it's there. But, well, José de Acosta, the conversion of indigenous peoples. So this takes us to the other constellation we are gonna talk about.
Thanks, Thomas. So perhaps one of the most exciting findings in the process of the curatorship was the relationship between astronomy and religion in the Americas. In their day-to-day work, missionaries resorted to their knowledge of indigenous languages, and they employed astronomical references to access indigenous peoples' knowledge belief systems. And preachers and religious authors used a specific kind of knowledge of the skies to inspire reverence or fear. This constellation has dictionaries, confessionaries, vocabularies in indigenous languages, and sermons. And we are going to highlight the Tovar Codex. This is one of the treasures of the John Carter Brown Library. It's a manuscript that has an appended calendar. This is what we're looking at now. It's painted in an indigenous hand, and it was made to express the correspondence between the Nawa and the Christian calendar. The image of the wheel is followed in the manuscript by a sort of Christian almanac of Nawa months. And in that almanac, symbols of the zodiac cohabit with indigenous iconography. And from this object and similar objects produced at the same time, the idea that the indigenous calendar is an astronomical calendar prevails, but actually that's a colonial invention. Neil, perhaps you can give us a close-up.
So this is the Tovar Codex. The first part, which I was showing you earlier, actually refers to the history of the Mexica people as they made their pilgrimage from the mythical spot of Aztlán to Tenochtitlan, the site of present-day Mexico City. And what's fascinating about this manuscript, which as Media pointed out, is truly one of the great treasures of this library, is that the second half of it really refers to these astronomical features and astrological features. Here you can see the zodiac for Marzo, or March, that is listed here, with Tlacachitehuatzcualtzli, which my Nahuatl is not good enough to be able to translate, but I don't know, maybe if you know what that term refers to?
Neil, we can't hear you very well. Could you maybe Put the microphone closer.
Can you unmute? Can you hear me here now? Is that better? Okay, how's this?
Yes, perfect.
Hold on one second. Hold on 1 second. My apologies. I'm dealing with two machines here. Unfortunately, so I was just saying that this is the second half of this item is the astrological, as Nidia pointed out, and you can see here the astrological sign here, Tlacashipe Huatlitzli. And I was just mentioning that my Nahuatl is not good enough to know what that means. Nidia, any help there?
Sorry, no. No, my Nahuatl isn't. I haven't studied that.
Okay, so this is a perfect example of why a lot of future research is necessary at the John Carter Brown Library to bring Nahuatlatos, or people who are specialized in the language of the Mexica, in to see the collection. And here is one of the spectacular images that this, by the way, is fully digitized, and in fact gives me the opportunity to say that all of the items that you'll be seeing tonight have been digitized and will be sent to you after this this session is over. So you need, if you want to, in the comfort of your home, refer to any of the materials that we have shown you, you'll be able to do that. This is the opening image of the 7 Ks, which is a very important episode in the history of the Mexica. Okay, do you guys want to move on?
Of course. So time takes us to another constellation that we've called Prognostications in Print. Now, this is a collection of rare and extremely elaborate objects that tell us about the uses of astronomy for timekeeping. So the observation of the periodic movement of the stars and the planets was a means of controlling the rhythm of human life, from intimate affairs to civil, religious, and political events. And some of the objects in this constellation are extremely fragile. Some you feel they might break in your hands, and others are actually very lavish volumes with elaborate tables and images. And we've chosen to show you the only copy in the world of an ephemeris calculated by a woman in New Spain and in the Americas. It's the only ephemeris by a woman printed in the Americas that is known of, and it's the only copy. Now, this ephemeris has all the conventions of the international genre that traveled to New Spain for the commerce of European books. And following that convention, the author writes a poetic preface. What's interesting here is that she uses all the emblematics used for masculine astronomy, so to say, for the creation of a female persona. And it's a very small object, it's a very small book. And perhaps, Neil, you can show us?
So as you can see, I was flipping through some of the, this is actually a wonderful, what looks like a original Mexican binding. It has a whole range of different items in it, from the Pronóstico de Lunaciones all the way here to this Ephemeris Calculada al Meridiano de Mexico. And you can see how this, which is kind of an icon, is sort of printed over this other part, which was printed before. I don't know if you can read what it says. It refers to Sabios Astronomos Americanos, to the wise American astronomers, eagles that measure the earth and the skies. This is an interesting image. Have you guys seen this right here?
Is that an ink pot, Neil?
It looks like some kind, it says the secret to write without the risk of revealing what the subject is. So it's like a kind of a secret code system. So anyway, and then we have the Gran Pescador de Salamanca right here as well. In any case, this is a wonderful, wonderful tiny object that has just a lot of wonderful items that are awaiting discovery.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah,
Thomas,
so,
want to continue?
yeah, we were talking about astronomical books that relate to time in some way. And besides that book that Nidia and Neil have just shown you, we have this quite interesting book here in the same constellation about time. This is the first book on navigational astronomy printed in Americas. So we could something like, well, this book should belong to the first constellation we've shown you. And it indeed belongs to the first one, but also to this one, the constellation about time. And this is a book also about instruments for navigation. And instruments take us to the final constellation we are going to display this night, called Instrumental Pursuits. And well, this is a group of objects, JCB objects, that talk about how American stargazers had conflicting attitudes towards instruments. Instruments sometimes instilled awe, but sometimes anxiety. They desired instruments. They used instruments as a means of legitimating their places locally and in the international stage. And the book that's blinking here is a very interesting book, the last one in this presentation. Perhaps you can see, this is a book printed here in Providence by John Carter, the grandfather of John Carter Brown. The book is Benjamin West's account of the observation of Venus across the sun. Twice every century, the planet Venus passes in front of the sun. This is a very difficult phenomenon to observe, to measure. And well, this Benjamin West, he partnered with a lot of important or influential, prominent townsmen here in Providence. One of them was Joseph Brown, who procured West instruments in London, like a telescope, a micrometer, in order to make very precise measurements, a helioscope, which is an instrument that allows you to observe the sun without burning your eyes. And then on the day of the passage of Venus in front of the solar disk, Benjamin West gathered with Joseph Brown, Moses Brown, and several important merchants and magistrates of the city to observe this phenomenon. So this was an astronomical observation, but also a political gathering. And this, well, talking about politics, this would lead us to yet another constellation. And we are not going to display all of them to you, but the idea is this: one book starts to lead us to another and another, and we this way change constellations. So thank you. And this was the presentation. If Neil has some jewel, some treasure to show us now.
Absolutely.
Good.
So is the sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is to show you some of the items that we pulled out. Hold on just one second. Okay. These are some of the items that were talked about earlier and others that were not. And so I'll let Tomas and Nidia talk a little bit about. The first is these efemérides generales. I brought this one out especially because it was one of our recent acquisitions that we acquired specifically in order to show at this exhibition. And it's one of the first star tables that includes American cities as points of observation in the larger setting. I can look for the here's a listing of all of the different cities that are including Jacalapa, which is probably Jalapa, and another one here, Jalisco in Mexico. So you can see that for the first time, American cities, here's Tenochtitlan, otherwise Tenochtitlan. For the first time, the American cities are shown side by side with other cities. I don't know if Boston made it on here. It might just be in the Spanish world, probably looks like it is. Providence undoubtedly will not show up either. But Tomas, do you want to mention anything about this particular text?
Well, I think you've pretty much covered it, except for a very interesting fact. The publisher, the printer of this book, Juan de la Cuesta, is the same printer of the first edition of Don Quixote de la Mancha. And this is wonderful to know about. If you just knew he was the printer of El Quixote, you wouldn't imagine he had so many numbers available in his print shop. And this is a huge book. Probably it took, I don't know, 2,000 number types to print something like this. It's a wonderful work of typographical art, and there's a lot of terrific astronomy going on there.
Nidia, perhaps you could tell us about this extraordinary chart.
Of course, this is a cometry map. It was printed in New Spain in 1681, and it was engraved by a little known engraver called Antonio Sarti, but it was actually commissioned by a Jesuit missionary called Eusebio Quino. It's a beautiful image because it synthesizes at the same time mathematical language, astronomical conventions, and the politics of place, with the Virgin of Guadalupe at the top right corner. It was appended to a book about the comet of 1681 that was viewed across the world. Very famous for the Newtonian explanation of it. But it was a global phenomenon, really. And it's very frequently understood in the context of a big dispute on the comet in Mexico City in 1681, one that involved the famous Carlos de Sigüenza y Góngora, who was an antiquarian, an astronomer, a cosmographer. So lots of stories that can be told from this map.
Fantastic. And then we have next to it a chart. This one dedicated to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in the state of Massachusetts and to the Philosophical Society of Pennsylvania by Bartholomew Burgess, published in 1789 in Boston.
Yeah, this is a very large schematic chart that depicts the functioning of the solar system and a couple of comets. It was appended to a book by the same Bartholomew Burgess. He was an instrument maker and teacher. And what I find very interesting about the map and the book alike is this dedication to two important early Republican academies in the US. This is a testimony to another time. This is once again, this is a testimony of the imbrication of politics, of national aspirations and science and astronomy, and well, those things cannot really be separated.
Fantastic. So this diminutive item here is pulled out specifically for Joyce Chaplin, who we know is on the call as well. Tomas, tell us about this extremely fragile object that looks like an almanac to me.
Yeah, it is an almanac printed in Philadelphia in 1707. The almanac author was Jacob Taylor. And well, like almost all almanacs that we can find in the JCB collections, and there are a lot of them, it's in an almost deteriorated state. But this is because this was a book that was used. People really used this. They carried it. It was in their pockets. They made a lot of annotations. They took note of important life events. This book has a beautiful annotation by a woman named Phoebe Arnold, noting the passing of her husband, Benedict Arnold, in 1733. So it was more than 20 years after the almanac was printed, and it was not, let's say, valid any longer, but, well, it kept being used and annotated, and it was a way for people to organize the time of their lives.
Fantastic. It's a wonderful example of some of the ephemeral items that we have in the collection, where the manuscript annotations in some ways become just as valuable as the printed object itself, and which requires and really just merits increased examination. So this is the last item of the show and tell, and then we're going to open it up for questions from those of you who are here. Is this wonderful, wonderful Carte Générale de la Terre by a man named Fléchieux, which in fact serves as the graphic for the beautiful poster that was designed for this exhibition by our own Tara Kingsley. You can see that it is unlike any general map that you've ever seen before, not only because the continents are upside down, but because the constellations and the celestial sphere in some ways is almost superimposed on top of the sphere, as if we had a kind of a divine view of the opened earth, and we're peering down into it. Tomas, Nidia, help us to understand what is actually going on in this crazy map.
Fléchieux, the author, was an instrument maker and a map maker. And here he is promoting his own projection of the Earth, which is at the same time double hemisphere, but also a polar view from both poles. And in the margins of the map, he is also promoting all the astronomical models and instruments that he is selling in his shop in Paris. And I believe that the map was acquired with a booklet. Is that right, Neil, describing these instruments?
I don't think that we have the booklet. Do we?
Yeah, we do.
We do have the booklet. No, you know what? The booklet, now I'm remembering, the booklet was not purchased with the map. It was actually purchased separately afterwards, I believe, which was a description. It's a complicated history. And Flécheux was a complicated figure who was a little bit of a kook, in fact, traversing the period of the French Revolution, and whose story also deserves to be elaborated on. You may also notice that there are these red lines that are showing the route of the Resolution, that is Captain Cook's vessel. And you can see it sort of moving around. And what I love about this is you can actually see it move from one hemisphere to the next across these lines. So it's a beautiful, beautiful example of the way in which these kind of astronomical inventors were figuring out new ways of using their material and of thinking about new ways of describing what it is to talk about this. So we've now come to the end of this portion, but we did want to open things up for all of you who have joined us to ask some questions. And I guess I would, just start things off by asking Tomas first, and then Nidia. Tomas, what new topics did you discover as you were working through these materials in the collection, or just generally, that you didn't know were there before? And then Nidia, once Tomas is done, what most surprised you about the materials that you found in this process?
Well, there are so many surprises and discoveries, but one of my favorite is the sheer number of almanacs that the JCB has in its collections. For me, this is amazing. Many of these almanacs are still being cataloged, and I'm sure you have treasures there. Very, very important, interesting for the reasons you've mentioned, Neil. The way people use them, and the JCB has really, an enviable collection of almanacs. It also has something that came to me, and I think to Nidia as well, as a beautiful surprise, the number of religious materials that in some way talk or relate to astronomy. This is amazing. You have several books in indigenous languages of the Americas, or perhaps I could say bilingual books, dictionaries and vocabularies, and each one of them has a lot of astronomy inside. Not only, the names of how do you say moon or sun or anything in another language, but sometimes they have phrases and things that, well, they were intended for missionaries, and missionaries had to inquire indigenous peoples about their astral beliefs. And this was beautiful to discover in the JCB.
Nidia, if I could change my question to you, riffing off of what Tomas just said, how did you find it to try to glean indigenous astronomical ideas from the texts of the exhibition? Because I know that was a very important priority for you and Tomas, and that there's a lot of materials that actually brings that out. Was that something that, again, surprised you, or did you find it to be perhaps easier to glean than you might have initially thought?
Well, I think for both Tomas and myself, contact with material in indigenous languages is quite new. We are basically trained as historians of science with an idea of the scientific revolution and, Aristotle, Copernicus, Tycho Brahe, that kind of narrative. And anyway, we are very far from that idea of the scientific revolution, but we hadn't had, I think, the chance to work with materials in indigenous languages. And so what's very interesting in working with them is that they're most of the times bilingual. And so, or there are glosses in Spanish. And so that's a way of working through these materials. But still, I have to say that I rely a lot on my colleagues who are specialists. And so this exhibition has actually been an amazing opportunity of opening dialogues with colleagues that work on completely different topics. Mesoamerican studies and astronomy really don't talk to each other in the historiography. So this is something that we are trying out, and it's been a real challenge, and it's been, I think it's been one of the greatest learnings. And another, I have to say, is the persistence of astrology. So astrology is in the almanacs, it's in the cosmography books, it's in the mathematical books, it just crosses through different genres in poetry, in treatises, and in sermons and religious sermons as well. And that's an invitation to rewrite the history of astronomy in many ways as well.
Great. Well, I looking out at the names of those who have joined us, I note several historians and scholars of note, as well as wonderful members of our broader JCB community. And so I want to give everybody who would like an opportunity to ask questions about the exhibition to our guest curators. And you will, as Nidia noted, the exhibition will be magically appearing before your eyes tomorrow. We don't know exactly at what time, probably late afternoon, I'm thinking, just to give you an anticipation. We also have an event tomorrow, I'm sorry, earlier than that, probably early afternoon. We have an event at 3 p.m. Eastern time with renowned historian of science, Simon Schaffer from the University of Cambridge, who will be listening to Tomas and Nidia give a guided tour and a guided introduction to the exhibition, but will also be reflecting on some of the innovative aspects of this exhibition. And he is an extraordinary specialist and a very generous scholar. So we hope you will join us for that. But in the meantime, are there any questions that you would like to ask? Either raise your hand, or you're welcome to put the question in the chat and we will ask it.
I would like to just blurt out, Neil and Nelia and Tomas, what a wonderful hour we just spent learning not only about astronomy and profound and vaulting knowledge and research, but the association of those concepts and so many other things that they elicited. This has been a really, really wonderful, enriching hour, by far the best hour on Zoom that I've had today, and just with the other foolishness floating around us. This was really profound and good. Thank you both. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions or comments? Joyce, anything to add about the Arnold Almanac, which I am sure that you looked at in the hundreds of almanacs you may have seen?
So if they didn't know anything about the weather, I probably didn't take extensive notes on it, unfortunately. I have looked at over 10,000 almanacs now for this database, and that meant that I got ruthless and a lot of information that was interesting, including, I would really like to see this again. And the Spanish American almanacs that I didn't, just by definition, look at, I think the comparative dimension, comparative aspects of them are really incredible, how they are a durable genre that you can recognize. And yet there do seem to be very interesting differences. And the female almanac preparer is just astonishing. That was news to me, and that is really, really interesting. So I don't really have a question. This is so fantastic. Thank you.
That's great. Well, that observation is really, really valuable in and of itself, and much appreciated. There are a couple of questions on the chat. One is from our Latin American books curator, Jose Montelongo, asking about the persistence of astrology, and asking if Nidia has found an approach to understanding this persistence other than a sort of superstitious appetite for future telling. And Olivia Berggruen, who's also on the call, adds to that, noting the scholar Avi Warburg and collector. So Nidia, do you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, of course. So let's start with Avi Warburg. I think if we think of Warburg's method for connecting ideas and images and passions across the history of representation and humanity in general, astrology is at the core of culture, that for Warburg. And astrology is actually a science of the stars, science meaning a way of knowing the heavens. It's not at all just superstition or appetite for future telling. It's a whole system for understanding the universe. And it's really based a lot on observation and on the recognition of patterns. It's about the past. It's about understanding the past, observing it, and finding the connections between the human body and the cosmos. It's a very complicated topic. It's also something that's new in my life, and it's very exciting. But I think there's an enormous potential there for future historians.
Wonderful. Tomas, would you like to add anything onto that?
I think I totally agree with Nidia. And well, this is one of the reasons it's been such a great pleasure working beside her for more than 1 year, because we, as she told us, we were trained in very similar schools of thought, but we also have this kind of interest, or unorthodox interest. And astrology is everywhere in the JCB, well into the 18th century. And I could even risk to say that the first 2 or 3 decades of the 19th century, you have at the JCB astrological material. Of course, it's not the same as Renaissance astrology or 17th century astrology, but it's a system of trying to establish what's the influence of the heavens on human affairs, and also on the environment. This persists well into the 19th century.
Joyce, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess in relation to that, I had the question about, in the English-speaking world, it's already the case that they joke about the astrology and mock belief in it. By the late 17th century, a kind of mini tradition in almanac making that Franklin picks up by the 1730s. So I wondered whether that was something you'd seen in almanacs from Spanish America that kind of, I know I have to put this in the almanac, but no one believes this, and here's another ridiculous thing about it, or whether that was distinctive to almanacs from British America.
We had two objects. They ended up not entering the exhibition, but they were really interesting for the reasons you've just mentioned. One of them was a traditional classic Spanish language almanac with a lot of astrological predictions. And then there is this whole parody of this almanac. It's really a work of parody, of sarcasm, from the preface to the last page. It's mocking, it's making fun of the other one. And the catalog at the JCB suggests perhaps the same author wrote both of them, the serious one and the mock one. So this is a really interesting thing for us to pursue. But also we have, I think, for instance, from Lima, from Peru, we have a lot of almanacs from the 18th century where I don't think we could really identify any kind of, oh, I'm gonna put the astrological things just because it's part of the genre. In fact, the church in Peru in the 18th century started to promote astrology, changing its own position against astrology in the 17th century as a way of regulating astrology. So this is really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, one of our efforts at the library during the Zoom period that we're living through is to try and more or less stick to the time that we said we were going to be with you. Before we say goodbye, however, I did want to emphasize, especially looking at the people who have joined us and the important contributions, both in terms of just general enthusiasm, but also financial support that all of you have given to the library, that this was such a collaborative effort with regards to Tomás and media, but especially with regards to the staff of the library, beginning with our spectacular cataloger, Allison Rich, to our digitization team, Donna Dorvik and John Minichiello, who have really heroically made these materials available during the pandemic time, ensuring that researchers have access to all of this wonderful material, to members of our curatorial staff, some of whom are with us today, Jose Montelongo, Domingo Ledesma, Bertie Mandelblatt, and individuals who are responsible for the programming and the technical aspects, which we apologize for in advance since we're still getting our sea legs with the Zoom and the microphone and everything. But Maddie Mott, who is our executive assistant, she did a spectacular job of bringing this material together. Tara Kingsley has done a wonderful work on this exhibition. And our digital engagement director, Pedro Germano Leal, has also been instrumental in getting the word out. So as you can see, it's really bringing everybody together with all of you who have helped to make it possible for us to have these amazing items in this collection. And finally, I just want to say thank you again, a profound and sincere debt of gratitude to Tomás and media, who became part of the JCB staff over these past months, working with us tirelessly. I'm still amazed at the amount of work that went into this, and you will all see the results of that, which is just a terrific exhibition that not only explains things simply for the lay audience, but also brings new perspectives for the established scholars among us. So with that, I just want to say thank you once again. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Please come back and tomorrow night and in the weeks to follow. Great to see friends from the world over joining us here. Thanks again. Take good care. Be safe. Go out and vote. And we'll see you back here, hopefully very soon, with our democracy and our skies fully intact.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.